From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! We're broadcasting from the Bolivian town of Tiquipaya, just outside Cochabamba.
The earth and the environment, the sky, they're all damaged by the transnational companies. Those transnational companies, with the smoke, they are contaminating the earth and the Pachamama. There's holes in the sky, and that is not okay.
As the World People's Summit on Climate Change and Rights of Mother Earth opens here in Bolivia, we'll hear from a leading Bolivian indigenous activist who helped to write the Constitution. Then we look at why Bolivian miners have staged a major protest at one of the world's largest silver mines. We'll speak with journalist Jean Friedman-Radofsky about the protest and about lithium, one of the most important new energy sources. The majority of the world's lithium deposits are located here in Bolivia. We'll also discuss geoengineering, the deliberate altering of the planet to decrease the level of greenhouse gas emissions. We'll be speaking with Right Livelihood Award winner Pat Mooney. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting from Bolivia. The death toll from last week's earthquake in China's Tibetan province of Qinghai has surpassed 2,000. Nearly 200 people are still listed as missing and over 12,000 have been wounded. The Chinese cabinet has declared Wednesday a national day of mourning. Air travel is slowly resuming in Europe after volcanic ash from Iceland grounded flights for over 5 days. European officials say they expect 60% of flights to be operational today. Flights to and from Britain remain closed, and British officials say a new cloud of ash from Iceland could extend the delay. In Iraq, the U.S. and Iraqi governments are claiming to have scored a major victory with the killing of 2 top militant leaders. An Iraqi unit backed by the U.S. reportedly carried out the operation Saturday. Vice President Joe Biden said the killings could mark a devastating blow to al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Abu Ayyub al-Mazari and Abu Umar al-Baghdadi, the former leaders of AQI, are the ones who plotted, planned, and executed terrorist attacks against the Iraqis in the recent past, as well as against Americans. Their deaths are potentially devastating blows to al-Qaeda Iraq. But equally important, in my view, is this action demonstrates the improved security strength and capacity of Iraqi security forces.
Despite Biden's claims, there is uncertainty around the identity of the second militant, Abu Omar al-Baghdadi. The Iraqi government has already claimed to have killed or captured him on previous occasions, and U.S. officials have questioned whether he's even a real person or a fictionalized persona invented by Iraqi militants. The Iranian government has barred Iran's 2 remaining legal opposition parties following the imprisonment of 2 of their leaders. The Islamic Iran Participation Front and the Mujahideen of the Islamic Revolution Organization had been the only groups authorized to participate in Iran's political system. The move came one day after 2 high-ranking officials from the parties were each sentenced to 6 years in prison. A Brazilian federal court has delayed bidding on a major hydroelectric dam in the Amazon rainforest for the 2nd time in less than a week. The $11 billion Belo Monte project was approved for construction earlier this year. A judge suspended the bidding last week to allow opponents to air their objections. That order was overturned days later, but on Monday, the same judge responded with another ruling calling for a delay. Also on Monday, hundreds of indigenous activists rallied outside the Brazilian Congress to oppose the dam.
Large sums of money are pouring in from Europe, France, Switzerland, Germany, China, and Japan. They are occupying all of the Amazon, building dams and water deposits for their own benefit. They don't care about what will become of the Indian lands. We will be forced out of our lands. We won't have homes. The indigenous population will be practically massacred.
New Zealand has become one of the last holdout countries to ratify the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights, leaving only the U.S. and Canada in opposition. New Zealand cabinet member Peter Sharples announced the move on Monday.
I come with humble heart to celebrate the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. The New Zealand government has long discussed this matter and has recently decided to support it.
The UN General Assembly passed the sweeping declaration granting Native peoples the right to self-determination in 2007 with an overwhelming 143 votes in favor. New Zealand was one of only 4 countries to vote against the declaration, along with the United States, Australia, and Canada. Australia has also reversed its position. In Egypt, a top government advisor has asserted that security forces can open fire on pro-democracy protesters. The official, the Interior Ministry advisor Hamid Rashid, made the comments in response to parliamentary questions over a government crackdown on a pro-democracy protest earlier this month. Rashid said officers are authorized to fire live ammunition at crowds that attack police. In related news, Egyptian activists are raising concerns over U.S. funding cuts to governance aid in Egypt. The Obama administration's recent budget request included a $25 million cut in funding for Egyptian civil society groups. The State Department is also now only allowing funding for groups authorized by the Egyptian government and is considering a plan to create a separate fund that would remove future congressional oversight on U.S. aid. The Obama administration has summoned a top Syrian diplomat over allegations Syria's transferred long-range Scud missiles to the Lebanese group Hezbollah. Israel leveled the weapons transfer allegations against Syria earlier this month. Syria denies the allegation and says Israel could be trying to lay the groundwork for a military attack. Member states of ALBA, the Bolivarian alternative of the Americas, have kicked off a summit in Venezuela. On Monday, Cuban President Raul Castro, Bolivian President Evo Morales, and Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega joined Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez at a parade marking Venezuela's bicentennial. The celebration comes days after Venezuela marked the 8th anniversary of the U.S.-backed coup that briefly removed Chavez from office. Addressing the crowd, Chavez called for continued resistance to foreign interference.
Here, the people and the soldiers are prepared to defend to the very last millimeter of this sacred land that will never be ruled by a foreign power, a free and independent country.
Financial giant Citigroup has announced a $4.4 billion first-quarter profit, its highest in almost 3 years. The firm has received over $45 billion under the taxpayer bailout of Wall Street. The news comes days after another bailed-out firm, J.P. Morgan Chase, posted a $3.3 billion first-quarter profit, a 57% increase from last year. In other financial news, Politico is reporting Goldman Sachs has retained President Obama's former White House counsel, Gregory Craig, for legal representation. Craig resigned from the Obama administration late last year. The news comes days after the Securities Exchange Commission filed a civil suit accusing Goldman of securities fraud for selling a mortgage investment that was established to fail. The investment consisted of pools of risky mortgages that had been packaged together. The New York Times reports 2 Goldman executives, including Chair and CEO Lloyd Craig Blankfein, were actively involved in overseeing the company's mortgage unit. Hundreds of people gathered in Oklahoma City on Monday to mark the 15th anniversary of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building that killed 168 people and wounded over 600 others. Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano addressed a crowd that included survivors of the attack and relatives of the dead.
We honor the continued need for vigilance against the violent ideologies that led to this attack, so that we can recognize their signs in our communities and stand together to defeat them. And above all, we remind ourselves that what defines us as a nation, as a people, and as communities is not what we have suffered, but how we have risen above it, how we have overcome.
As the